Every summer for the past couple of years, my two cousins and I have gone to our cabin on the shores of Lake Resin in North Dakota. It's kind of a tradition we have. Matt and Sarah are my cousins' names. We're all about the same age, with Matt being just a little older than Sarah and I, and we're the kind of family that butt heads constantly and poke fun at each other, yet remain best friends at the end of the day. We love hanging out and spending time with each other, but we hate the lake. Summertime on the shore of a lake sounds quite nice actually, but in reality, it consists of nothing more than us hiding out in the cabin all day, every day. We can't stand to go outside anywhere near the water. Apparently, many other people felt the same way, because there's a failed lodging resort with many vacant cabins surrounding our own. I'm not even sure if the other cabins are still for rent, but it doesn't really matter as no one is ever dumb enough to buy one. In fact, no one is ever dumb enough to go to Lake Resin at all. Well, except for us apparently. This is because of the bugs. There are so many goddamn bugs. They seem to blanket everything with unimaginable numbers. Even the surface of the water is coated with mosquitoes and nymphs, making it nearly impossible to swim. For the past 2 summers it has been this way, but 3 years ago the lake was actually quite a popular place. The now vacant cabins contained hundreds of frat boys and general partiers, and people flocked in from just about everywhere to get in on the action. But that all stopped when the bugs began to appear. Within 1 summer, you couldn't flip a hamburger on a grill without hundreds of flies attacking it mid-air. You couldn't play music over the roar of thousands of cicadas. You could barely even see the sun at times through the blizzard of flying insects. Now, if this were a year or 2 ago, I may have been exaggerating, but things seem to have been getting worse from year to year. We certainly had this in mind as we packed our stuff and drove towards Lake Resin. We may have been the only ones doing it, but to us, we thought it was kind of cool that we still went to the lake and were able to tough it out every year. It gave us bragging rights. People who hated bugs couldn't even listen to our stories. But this year, things were far worse than they had been any of the previous years. We could already tell by the sheer number of bugs hitting our windshield as we drove, still several miles away from the lake. Every foot or so we hit another one, like clockwork. Then, as we neared the lake, we could make out a haze encompassing the area. A haze made up of nothing but flying insects. Suddenly, bugs began smacking into our windshield in incredible numbers. I turned on the wipers because I could barely see the road, but all that did was smear the guts, making it even worse. Finally, when I had just about run out of windshield wiper fluid, we reached the cabin. I threw the car into park. "Whew, that's a lot of bugs," Sarah commented, provoking a no-duh expression from Matt. "I was just saying, you know what, screw you guys," she jokingly pouted. That's when a fly hit the windshield and splattered. And then another, and then 3 more did the same. We all looked at each other strangely. We weren't driving anymore. We weren't hitting them. They were hitting us. Shaking this off, we assured ourselves that it would be worth the crazy stories and bragging rights, like always. We hesitantly threw open our doors and scrambled to grab our suitcases and get into the cabin. As we did so, the bugs swarmed and began to cover us, buzzing in our ears and eyes. Just like always, I told myself. That's just what bugs do. We finally managed to get our stuff and scramble inside the cabin, slamming the door behind us. We all began slapping the bugs on us and pulling them out of our hair. I always hate that part, Sarah sighed as she spit out a bug or 2. The next several hours were spent attempting to swat the army of bugs we had let in when we opened the door to get inside the cabin. However, our cabin was rather large as cabins go, having 2 separate bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a fairly decent kitchen, and a living room with a plasma screen and all. This made it incredibly hard to track down all the bugs and just plain maddening to try and hit one. Thankfully, in anticipation of this, I had brought a bug zapper. I hooked it up, and we all sat back on the living room couch as bug after bug met their doom. I picked up the remote and flipped on the TV. Static. I don't know what I expected, I sighed. Yeah, with so many bugs this year, our satellite dish is bound to be coated with them, Matt chimed in. I guess we'll have to knock them off tomorrow morning, I said as I slumped further into the couch. The bugs were usually more mild in the early morning, so that would be our best bet if we planned on going outside without practically suffocating on them. It was 12 o'clock presently. I'm bored. I think I'm going to take a quick nap, I mumbled, getting off the couch and then dragging my feet to my designated room. Dude, count me in, Matt commented as he sprawled out onto the couch, pushing Sarah off. Ah, you shit, she cried. Fine then, I'll just go take your bed. She stormed off into Matt's room adjacent to mine and slammed the door. I smiled to myself as I laid on my bed, and then slowly drifted off. I awoke to the sound of buzzing. Granted, it had been going since we approached the lake, but now it was deafening, almost making the house shake. I had to put my hands over my ears to be able to think. It was nighttime. Apparently, my little nap had lasted longer than I had planned for. I walked out of my room and down the hallway towards the living room and kitchen, flicking on lights as I went. I had hoped either Matt or Sarah had prepared dinner, but there was no one there. Standing in the dimly lit kitchen, I looked over at the living room to see Matt still asleep on the couch. I was about to yell at him to wake up when I saw the clock on the wall. It was 1 o'clock p.m. I had only slept for an hour. It must be off, I thought, but then I checked my watch, which confirmed it. Puzzled, I walked over to one of the windows and saw why it was dark. It was solid black, covered in bugs to the point where no sunlight was visible. It was the same with every window. Matt snorted and woke up with a start. "Dear God, what is that sound?" he said, plugging his ears. Sarah then walked out from Matt's room, looking dazed and confused. "What time is it?" she asked groggily. I pointed to the window. They both looked, and then looked back at me as if saying, "So what?" "Look closer," I said. They both leaned forward and squinted. "Oh my God," Matt cried as he saw the swarm plastered to the window. "What the... This has never happened before, man. I don't know if this is worth it anymore. It's getting to be a bit too much." Sarah slowly nodded in agreement. "So what then?" I said. "We just walk on out there and leave? Are you guys hearing this? There's no way we can go out with this many bugs. We'll just have to wait till morning." Matt and Sarah both solemnly agreed. With that, we all sat back down on the couch. The hours crept by agonizingly slowly as we tried not to look at the squirming mess of bugs coating the windows and probably the entire house. We had no board games, no cards, and no TV. All we could do was sit and listen to the sound of bugs scampering all around us. I could almost feel their legs on me, crawling every which way, and I could feel the air vibrating with a million beating wings. I could tell Matt and Sarah felt the same. We all looked pale, sick, and nervous, just sitting around curled up on the couch, legs folded into our chests and trying desperately to think of anything but bugs. The fly zapper was still zapping, which meant that slowly but surely, insects were beginning to find their way into the house. I began to rock back and forth, digging my nails into my skin. I couldn't escape the sound of those things. I imagined centipedes crawling over my face, trying to get inside me. They squeezed their way up my nose, and the smaller ones forced their way through my tear ducts. They managed to slip past my tightly pursed lips and were instantly crawling everywhere in my mouth. I could feel their legs in my throat. I couldn't breathe. "What the fuck, John?" Matt yelled. I screamed and snapped out of my nightmare to realize that I had been clawing at my face. My hands were drenched in blood, my fingernails caked with my own skin. Matt and Sarah were staring at me, horrified. We stayed like that, frozen, for what seemed like forever, before Matt finally spoke up. "Let's get dinner started," he said, changing the subject and trying to stay calm. "I think we could all use a little something to get our mind off things." We all agreed and walked into the kitchen. Dinner to us would be a box of cereal, as we didn't bother to bring any real food. I opened the cupboard, shedding light on a dozen or so spiders and sending them scattering throughout the kitchen. They were also somehow getting inside. Ever so slowly, they were all going to get in, I told myself. We each poured ourselves a bowl and began eating. None of us got very far, though. I tried everything I could to take my mind off the bugs, but every little piece of cereal was like a mealworm, and it seemed to move and squirm in my mouth. Then, a fly flew into my bowl and got trapped in the milk. "I can't take this anymore," I screamed and threw my bowl across the room, smashing it on the far wall, spilling milk and cereal everywhere. A wave of cockroaches came out from nowhere and scurried to the mess. "Calm down, John," Matt yelled. "What the hell was that for? I'm fucking sick of all these bugs crawling and flying and... God damn it, why can't they just fucking leave us alone?" I yelled. "Who are you helping by complaining?" Matt yelled. "Just shut up, we'll get through this, we'll get out in the morning." "It won't be better in the morning," I screamed. "It's only going to get worse, I know it." "Shut the hell up, don't talk like that," Matt yelled. "You know it's true." "Both of you just shut up," Sarah cried. We looked at her, angry at first, but then mortified. Her face was shredded. Chunks of skin had fallen off her face and into her cereal bowl as blood ran down her neck. We had been too busy arguing to notice her tearing away at her face, I assumed trying to get rid of the bugs that didn't really exist. Just like me. "Oh my God, Sarah," I cried, reaching out my hand towards her. "Don't touch me," she shrieked and slapped my hand away. "Everyone calm down," Matt bellowed. Being the biggest out of all of us, we shrunk away from him, stopped talking, and looked at him intently. "Now," he calmly announced, "why don't we all get some rest, huh? I know you two could use it. You can have my room again, Sarah. I'll take the couch." I was amazed at how much of a big brother figure he was being. Here he was in the midst of all this, keeping his own cool and keeping me and Sarah in line. "Let's listen to him," I said, nodding at Sarah. "He's right. All we need is some sleep." With that, we headed off to our separate beds and tried to get some rest. I must have dozed off at some point, but I awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of the front door opening. I didn't immediately realize what that meant in my foggy mind, but when it hit me, I shot out of bed and sprinted down the hallway towards the living room where the front door was. When I arrived, I saw Matt standing with his back to me, hand on the doorknob. It didn't look like he had opened the door, Yet. I picked up one of her heavy wooden stools from the kitchen and wound it up, ready to swing. "Matt, what the hell are you doing?" I yelled. He turned around. I nearly vomited. He was covered from head to toe with insects. They were burrowing in and out of his skin, enveloping him, eating him, but I could still make out his eyes, which widened when he saw me. "I was just locking the door," he said, far too calmly. What are you doing with that stool, buddy?" he asked, motioning for me to put it down. "Don't lie to me," I screamed. "Why would you lock the door? Who's going to try and get in with what's going on?" Then it hit me. "Sarah called for help, didn't she? Didn't she? And you didn't want them to be able to save us," I yelled, tearing up. "I trusted you." "What are you talking about?" Matt said, looking extremely concerned. "You're not making any sense, man. Put down the stool and we'll talk about this." "We don't have time to talk," I yelled, getting ready to swing. Matt took a step back. "John, you're scaring the crap out of me, man. Are you feeling okay?" he said with genuine fear in his voice. "You're covered in bugs," I laughed. "Haha, they'll eat you before you can say anything." "Bugs," he said, looking at himself. "John, there aren't any bugs on me." His head buckled and shattered as I smashed the stool straight into his lying face. He hit the door and then slid to the ground in a bloody mess as several of his teeth and a few skull fragments landed across the room. He was dead instantly, but blood continued to pump out of his scrambled head, soaking the carpet. There were suddenly no bugs on him. Not a one. I stood in disbelief. What had I done? That's when Sarah screamed. I whirled around to see her standing in the hallway, looking at me next to Matt's mangled body. "I can explain," I said, voice shaking. "He was trying to keep us here. The bugs were eating him. I know they're gone now, but they were all over him, I swear." I fell to my knees, pleading for her to believe me. "It's okay," she said, voice steady and collected. "I understand." She then began scratching her scalp vigorously, and several spiders fell out of her hair. Then she started laughing. She laughed in a way I'd never heard before. It sounded pained, maniacal. She continued standing there laughing and tearing at her scalp until her scalp began to bleed and clumps of her hair fell out onto the floor. "Stop that," I yelled. "They're not very deep yet," she chuckled. "I can still get them out." "Sarah, there are no bugs in you," I pleaded, grabbing her arms and lowering them. "Let me go get some bandages. You stay here and for the love of God, try not to scratch." At that, she stopped tearing at herself and slumped onto the ground. "Fine," she grumbled. I went to the bathroom and looked for the bandages. They were nowhere to be found. I looked everywhere, in every drawer, and in the same places multiple times, and began to wonder if we had forgotten to bring them in the first place. Finally, I realized that I must have forgotten to unpack them. I had left Sarah alone for far too long at this point. I knew it. I sprinted to my bedroom, unzipped my suitcase, grabbed the bandages, and ran back out into the living room, but Sarah was gone, and so was Matt. The bloodstains were still there, but his body had been moved. I was looking at the soaked carpet when I heard a gruesome bone-crunching sound that made my skin crawl. I looked over to the couch and saw Matt's body lying on it, with Sarah standing over him, repeatedly plunging a kitchen knife into him, cutting him open, scrambling his insides. I ran to her and grabbed the knife away. "Sarah, what the fuck?" "They're inside him, can't you see?" she laughed. "The bugs! I'm getting them out for him." I looked and there were no bugs in him at all, only his entrails which were now spilling out onto the couch. "For Christ's sake, Sarah, there's nothing inside him," I yelled. "You're not right in the head." "Neither are you," she said, trying to grab the knife back, laughing giddily. "You killed him," she giggled. I froze. She was right. In the moment it had felt so right, like the only thing I could do, but Matt was telling the truth. There were probably no bugs on him at all. None of what I said to him earlier made any sense. "Go to your room," I shouted at Sarah, pushing her away forcefully. "I need to clean up this mess you made." I looked at the clock. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, but the bugs blanketing the house had only gotten worse, more numerous. The sound of them squirming was louder than ever. I decided not to inform Sarah of this as she sauntered back into her room grumpily and slammed the door behind her. I took a deep breath and, holding it, began to place Matt's intestines back inside of him. The stench was overpowering and I dry heaved and gagged, thankful that I had no food in me to throw up. I was getting more and more nauseous and my vision began to falter. I tried as best I could to be strong, but as a jet of blood squirted up and hit me in the face, my legs grew weak and I passed out on the ground. In my last moments of consciousness, I realized that I no longer had the knife. Sarah must have taken it from me. I awoke to find the house completely dark. Apparently, the power had gone out as I flicked several switches to no avail. I fumbled my way through the pitch-black living room, down the hall, and into my room where I grabbed my flashlight. I flicked it on and shined it at Sarah's room across the hall. Her door was still shut. I knew I wouldn't like what I found in there. That's when I noticed a trail of blood leading to her room. I hadn't been able to see it before in the darkness, but Matt's body was gone from the couch. Apparently, Sarah had dragged it down the hallway and into her room. Taking a big breath, I opened the door slowly. It creaked and moaned as I stepped into the room. I slowly scanned the room with my flashlight until it illuminated the bed, revealing Sarah sitting on the edge, hunched over, her back to me. You alright? I asked quietly and nervously. Her head slowly turned, and she looked at me. Or, I assume she looked at me. Her eyes were gone, crudely carved out with a jagged knife she held in her hand. She said nothing, just stared at me with her empty sockets, and slowly opened her mouth until it was horrifyingly agape and held it there, slowly breathing in and out. Then she got up from the bed and took a step towards me, then another. I began sidestepping out of the way, but bumped into the doorframe. Her head turned towards where I now stood, and she began to scream, without moving her mouth from its horrifyingly jarred open position. She was walking faster now, arms outstretched, knife in one hand, mouth agape, screaming loudly, now running at me. I dodged out of the way just in time and ran into my room, pressing myself against the far wall. She heard me run into my room, but seemed unsure as to where I was exactly. Her scream slowly died out, but her mouth remained open as she entered my room and stood in the doorway. Then she began swinging wildly, fumbling around, bumping into my nightstand in bed, slowly making her way to where I was. She was looking right at me, but I was pretty sure she didn't realize it. I tiptoed as best as I could around the perimeter of my room towards the doorway. I was inches away from escape when my elbow bumped into the wall, making a solid thud. She whirled around to face me and I took off running down the hall, but tried to move carefully and slowly as I approached the living room in an attempt to not tip her off as to where I was. She didn't follow me out of the room immediately, but I could hear her voice echoing down the hallway. "John," she said calmly. "They're inside you, John." Then a giggle echoed through the house. She now slowly emerged from the room and began walking down the hallway very slowly. Her legs wobbled and bent awkwardly, trying to hold her up. Blood continued to run down her face, soaking the ground. "Let me help you, John," she said. I was desperately looking for a hiding spot. "I can feel you moving," she whispered. "You have heavy feet." She giggled and scratched her head some more. "I can hear you breathing now. You're by the couch." Shit, she had me. Sarah's mangled body reached the end of the hallway and now stood, head tilted, her grotesque, eyeless face staring at me with a big smile. I tried to tiptoe to my right, but her head followed me, not hesitating for a second. Since she already knew where I was, I tried to buy myself some time. How do you plan on getting the bugs out of me if you can't see?" I asked her. Shouldn't you give me the knife so that I can do it?" Her face became puzzled. "You already said that," she stated slowly. "When you dragged Matt's body into my room, you said that exact same thing." My blood froze. "What was that?" I said. "And then you cut my eyes out," she continued. My legs grew weak and I sunk to the floor in despair. I don't remember doing any of that," I cried, beginning to tear at my scalp. Sarah calmly informed me. "I had been scratching my head too much, and there was so much blood in my eyes that I couldn't see. It was your idea to cut them out and get rid of the bugs in me, so you asked me to give you the knife, and I did. It hurt really bad. I don't want to do it again." I'm so sorry," I apologized and began to weep. "Don't be sorry," she said. "You helped me. I just want to return the favor." "It's your turn now." She began walking towards me again. I frantically searched for somewhere to run, but no. It just wasn't fair. I knew what I had to do. "Fine," I said, slowly standing up and walking over to her. "Please, go ahead." I needed to be punished for what I had done to her. I deserved much worse than having my own eyes carved out. "Make it slow," I said, placing my hand on her shoulder and bracing myself for what was to come. She smiled and placed one of her hands on my face, feeling where my eyes were, and then brought the knife back slowly, holding it there for a minute before plunging it forward. I woke up in North Dakota State Hospital. Apparently, some frat boys in the cabin next to us had heard the commotion and found Sarah and I unconscious on the floor of the living room with our eyes carved out, dying of blood loss. They immediately called an ambulance. And yes, I said frat boys in the cabin next to us. The lake had apparently been a huge hotspot that year. Nearly every cabin was booked, the music blared, burgers were flipped, and everyone had a great time jumping in the lake to escape the summer heat. Despite my repeated questions about how they managed to get to us with all the bugs, people's response was always the same. "Bugs? What bugs?"